Good evening. It's about time for us to begin our worship. This evening we will sing 3 songs before being led in a closing prayer to dismiss us to classes. We'll begin with "O Magnify My Master," number 83 out of the Hymns for Worship supplement. "O Magnify My Master." We'll sing all 3 verses. "Boundless Love," number 59, out of the same supplement, 5-9. We'll sing both verses. Boundless love. Soon, number 386 out of the large hymnal. 386. I'll try to keep the tempo up on this, don't want to drag it.
Troublesome times are here, the times with fear. We all hear as I sing, on your heart to God, to the changeless ceasing rise, where to the side, Christians away. Jesus is coming soon, for your mind will be there to troublesome sounds so surely sound. All the powers that shall rise, Christ be righteous in the skies. Only when no one dies, and we're bound. Troubles will see the o'er, forevermore. We on the shore, free from care. Rising up in the sky, telling us goodbye. Onward we will fly, glory to share. Jesus is coming soon, for your mind, they will near doom. Troublesome sounds will surely sound. All the powers that shall rise, Christ be righteous in the skies. Onward, knowing when no one dies, and we're bound.
Let us pray. Holy Heavenly Father, we come to you after singing praises to you in our awe of your majesty, your power, and the love that you have shown to us, even on a night like tonight where it's dark and it's rainy outside. We can see your power and provision in the way that you provide for this earth, for all its life upon it. And we come together and we see us worshiping together with like faith. And we see your provision through your Son, who is the connection and the bond between all of us and all of us to you. We're so eternally grateful for that. We pray that as we have sung tonight, that you have been pleased. Pray that as we break to go to our classes at this time, that all of us will be attentive to the lessons that are taught, that you are with the teachers tonight and that what they teach is in accordance with your word. And we leave here with a better understanding of your Son and for how you would have us all live in order to please you and to shine his light out into the world. It's through him that we pray at this time. Amen.
All right, Chris, let's get started, huh? Taylor's here today, so I'm relegated back here. Don't tell him last time I was walking all over the place. It was great. No, I'm just kidding. Great to be here tonight, everybody. Tonight, first off, I almost forgot my first thing on my list. Adam is going to be teaching. You've survived, will survive, God willing, 4 classes with me, and then I'm going to have some bye weeks coming up. Adam's going to be taking over for me for the next 3, or it's going to be his turn, and he has his handout up in the basket back there. So it's right under mine, so grab that on your way out if you didn't get it, and that's going to be for the next 3 lessons. So it's lesson, I believe, 5, 6, and 7. So tonight, we're going to be talking about hypocritical adults. And, you know, the first 3 classes, we talked about maintaining a tender heart. Here, let me go to the... Maintaining a tender heart, dating and sexual purity, and modesty, and cares of the world. And a lot of these, that's kind of been external focus. These are things coming in at our kids. And this is going to be one that I'm pretty nervous to teach, to talk about, because this is talking about us. This is us. This is a potentially negative influence on our kids being us. And it's kind of a hard thing to think of. But we've gone through some difficult topics, so we'll take this one with love, with patience, with long suffering, and thank God for His mercy towards us as we learn how to be better parents. And it's a pleasure to be here tonight. So with that, let's jump into it. So a couple of assertions to start off here. So in considering ourselves, 1, our role as parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and adults in this congregation, that comes with a very heavy responsibility. In order to be an effective example and role model to our children, we must first take heed of our own spiritual walk. That's kind of almost commonsensical, right? Like, before I can show someone else the way, I need to be walking that way. Let's read. We're going to read 5 verses. I'm going to read 2, and then I have some volunteers, or I asked them rather persuasively to volunteer to read, just to kind of get our minds centered on what we're going to be talking about tonight. So the first 2 is going to be from 1 Corinthians 9 and then 1 Corinthians 10. So 1 Corinthians 9, verse 27. Paul speaking, but I discipline my body and bring it into subjection, lest when I have preached to others, I myself should become disqualified. Paul, he's sitting here, he's teaching, but he knows fundamentally, I need to worry about myself as well, because I don't want to be disqualified. I don't want to tell you all these things and then play the hypocrite. Carrying along that thought, it's on the same page for me down in 1 Corinthians 10, verse 12. Therefore, let him who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall. All right, Zach, I think I had you on the first one. We'll go to Ephesians 6, 1 through 4, please.
Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise, that it may be well with you and you may live long on the earth. And you, fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord.
And that's an act of bring them up. I've heard some people say, well, I was brought up, or I came up. But no, this is an intentional process. Stu, would you mind reading for me Deuteronomy 6 through 7, please?
And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise.
And it's one of my favorite verses. I think Tim referenced this when you taught your parenting class. How often are we supposed to be talking about God? All the time. When we're laying down, when we sit up, when we're sitting around the breakfast table eating cereal at night, when we're sitting around, we're talking about God. And then Paul, would you mind reading for me, sir, 2 Timothy 1, verse 5, please?
I am reminded of your sincere faith, a faith that dwelt first in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and now, I am sure, dwells in you as well.
So Paul speaking to Timothy here, acknowledging the influence that he had, or that his grandmother and mother had. It's interesting he didn't talk about his father, right? But the faith that his grandmother and his mother had in his life, in him becoming the Christian man that Paul really needed him to be to help. So, with that, we are not our own. We know that we are slaves to God. Children are a blessing from God, and that we must be an example to them. So, there we go. Sorry, that was supposed to be where it was. All right, so we're going to divide the class tonight into two. The first part is going to be parents, and the second part is going to be basically other people. So you think parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, if you have a direct connection to kids, this is who we're talking about, but then all of us to other children are connected to them. But we're going to talk about other adults then too. So starting off, the same kind of class that we had the very first night, attitude. Attitude is the foundation of everything that we're doing. What kind of attitude, and this is almost rhetorical, but just, what do you think? What kind of attitude should we as parents or grandparents, aunts, uncles have in the gospel or in our faith and our walk? What do you think? Tim Payne, looks like you're raising your hand.
You scratch your eyebrow. And
it's an auction. That's right.
I was just thinking about the fact that our kids are not ours, they're God's. And if you look at it, like you said, that we're stewards of that, it gives us a little better mindset. Like, it's my child if I do something wrong, but we are stewards of that ground, and we need to do our best to bring them up to where we're supposed to.
Yeah. And that includes your attitude, right? Zach.
The first verse you read talked about discipline, right? And so if you think about a farmer and good ground cultivation, it requires discipline. It's not just, I'm going to go out there on day one and till the ground, and I'm going to leave it alone for the next 6 months and hope something grows. It requires daily discipline to control yourself, be in subjection to your emotions, and be purposeful in how you interact with your kids, but also reflect your discipline in the Lord and how He would want you to interact and shine that light. Or are we dulling it through our own lack of discipline?
Yeah, and you look at, we want our kids to be that good ground. We've got to be that good ground as well. Like if we are to continue that metaphor, if you go a season without doing any type of maintenance, weeding, whatever it might be, it's going to be out of control. And so even though we've are mature in Christ, we have to continually be maturing. Is there ever a time that there would be be different between our attitude and our kids, where it's okay to have a different attitude? I was trying to think of one, an instance where it would be okay, where we could say, hey, you need to have this attitude and I'll have another one. Is that a very confusing way of offering that sentence? Can anybody think of any? I couldn't. So where it's, and that kind of reeks of do what I say, not as I do type of attitude. And that's kind of a stereotypical thing that kids shout at or parents shout at their kids when they're mad. But it's not. At the end of the day, just to go back to some of the things we talked about in our first lesson, love, kindness, forgiveness, compassion, thankfulness, appreciation, humility, selflessness, endurance, determination, all of those things need to be what describe us. And how can we expect those things of our kids if that's not who we are? All right, we're going to talk about hypocrisy now. What is a hypocrite? Before we get to this question right here, what is a hypocrite? When you think of hypocrite, what does that mean to you? Anybody? Kendall, what do you think?
A person that says one thing and means the other.
Got it. Yep. Yeah. So I was kind of looking into the Greek just to try to see what I could find. It's basically not a screenwriter, an actor. You think of someone wearing a mask. He's taking on a fake persona. That's what a hypocrite is. Let's go to Matthew 6 real fast. I think this is kind of interesting talking about. Matthew 6, 5 through 6. And when you pray, you shall not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the corners of the streets, that they may be seen by men. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward. But you, when you pray, go into your room, and when you have shut your door, pray to your Father who is in the secret place, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. What were they doing that was hypocritical? Were they praying in the open? What about it was hypocrisy? Anybody, don't be shy. Help me out.
Attention to themselves, not offering a prayer, a sincere prayer to God, but for show. Look how great I am with my prayers.
Right. The purpose behind their action, their motivation, their deep down thoughts, it's all for their own glory. Absolutely. Thank you. So with that thought in our minds, what can we do as adults, as parents in this case, that might be hypocritical as seen through the eyes of our kids? And if y'all don't say anything, I've got a list. There we go. All right. Wait, go ahead.
Real big one is not letting them know when we messed up. Like telling them we're sorry for how we acted, or we didn't do this right, we didn't handle this right. So many times with my kids, it's, hey, I catch you doing something. I'm like, what did you do wrong? What do you need to do to fix it? If it involves somebody else, you need to go tell that person you're sorry. So if I never show that attitude of, even if it's something small, like, hey, I shouldn't have done that, or I'm sorry I did that, I shouldn't have. I mean, that kind of plays into this idea of, you're supposed to do this, but you're not going to see that from me.
Yeah, that's hard too. It's. I mean, I've had to do it. Tonight I'll be confessing all the things I've done that's terrible. Where I've gotten unnecessarily mad at my kids. Like that's a hard thing, and going back and saying, hey, I reacted wrong. I'm sorry. You're right. What else? Zach.
Inconsistency. So like if I'm a person on Sunday, and then on Monday I turn around and the rules are different, or I don't react the same way about this other thing, or maybe I'm overly harsh about this thing instead, and on Tuesday it's a completely different. The kids don't know what to expect when I walk in the door, or when they do something and react, and it just creates chaos.
Yeah. They see you as a liar. Yeah. Which, are they wrong? No. What else? What do we think? Yes, ma'am.
Internet usage. If I tell him, hey, it's time for you to get off your iPad or something like that, and then I'm sitting here and he's like, I thought it was time for us to put up our electronics. And then I'm like, well, hold on, I'm trying to finish the conversation. And I'm like, oh, wait, no, you're right.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even think, I have something on the internet, but I didn't even think of it in terms of that. Yeah, I need to work on that real hard. Yes, sir.
Everybody's seen that movie, A Christmas Story? And I think about that scene where the boy gets his mouth washed out because he says a cuss word, and they're blaming it on all these other kids, and it turns out it's his dad.
It was dad, yeah.
So I just think about those things that our kids actually are learning so much from us. What are they hearing from us? What are we teaching them in our language and our attitudes? Yeah. We're demanding they share. Are we generous? Are we hospitable? We're demanding they get along with their siblings, but we fight and yell and scream at our wives or others.
Right, absolutely. There was Noah several years back had this habit of saying, "I'm going to kill you." Like people in school, like he would just that was his. I'm going to kill you. Where did he get that? It was me. I was the one saying that, and so Sophia pulled me aside. She's like, "Hey, you got to stop." I was like, "I know you're being funny, or you think you are, but it's not funny." I was like, "Okay." So that's where he got that. So what else? What do we think? This is kind of a list I had. If y'all can read that, is that okay? It should not too bad. Inappropriate language. Stu, you mentioned cursing. That's a big one. We can't expect our kids to. They know if we use that language, or if we laugh when that language is used, or if we post a meme or a GIF online that has a curse word in it. They see that, they know it. Treatment of others at work or at school. Traffic, that's something I need to work on. How we treat our spouse, that's huge. They see that, they know it. I know of an example where a Christian husband and wife would have such terrible fights, yelling, screaming, hitting, throwing, that their kids would actually hide and call their grandma and say, hey, and then she'd be like, well, put me on the phone with them. And then they're going to take that person to church and take a Lord's Supper and pray and do all that. What are we doing? Work ethic, I think, is a big one too, especially for the young men. Attitude towards church. Is it really a pleasure to come to church, or is it a burden? I'm just going to church until my parents die. Does anyone know anybody that's like that? I do. What about this? What about being spiritually high maintenance? And Sophia told me if I said high maintenance, all the ladies would think I was talking about them with like getting your hair done and all this other stuff. That's not what I mean. I mean spiritually high maintenance. Let's go to 2 Timothy 2. Second Timothy 2, verse 23. Actually, let's start in 22. So Paul speaking to Timothy here. Flee also youthful lusts, but pursue righteousness, faith, love, peace with those who call on the Lord out of a pure heart. But avoid foolish and ignorant disputes, knowing that they generate strife. How many of us know people, and how many of us are people, that always has a fight going on? There's always something going on. I don't have Facebook, but for those that do, I'm told that you can go through and you can see all your history and everything. Scroll through that. What kind of image are you putting out there? What kind of thoughts are you declaring to the world? Is this something that there's always something going on, or are you a rock of calmness that we're called to be with Christ? Just a thought. Misplaced priorities. We talked about that last week with how do we spend our time? What do we talk about? Our kids know that too. If all my mind is always on work or in the deer stand or on the next deal or whatever else, football, I can't name a verse, but I can tell you who the starting quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers. Is that a problem? It could be. It could be. Okay. All right. Any other thoughts here? Yes, sir.
So when it talks about elders and the qualification of elders, it talks about judging men by their family and their children, and your kids are they're like little mini spies for the rest of the world, right? Truly, you can get an insight on a person by just how their children are. I know there's exceptions to every rule, but truly, all the things that you mentioned, if you will see that acted out in your children.
Yeah.
And it'll tell you exactly how things are at home, no matter what you see here or out. You can see what's happening at home to your kids, and that's it falls in with here. Truly, that's terrifying. I gotta watch myself.
My grandma, I'll put her on the spot. She says that the best way to find out what's going on in my house is to ask Luke. He's our 7-year-old. He'll sit. All she's got to do is put him in front of some ice cream, and he'll just everything that's going on. So he knows. He knows. Here's a question for those of us in here that are sinners, which is all of us. Sins that we've committed in our past. How do we talk? If I did something terrible as a young adult, or not even terrible, just sin. I did something inappropriate. Do I have the right, the authority, whatever word you want to insert in there, to talk to my children about that, or am I a hypocrite? Yes, sir.
Have you repented? Are you still engaged in that? How do you see that? How do you discuss that with your kids?
Who calls himself the chief of sinners? Paul. But what's the subject he didn't talk about? I mean, he murdered Christian, or I don't know if he murdered, but he was at least, yeah, exactly. He was helping. He was happy it was happening. The answer is yes. If you've repented, if you're on the straight and narrow, get to work attacking the sin in your kids. Yes, sir.
I was thinking you're taking that a little different direction, because what sometimes we tend to do is we speak almost with fondness of maybe our wilder days as young kids or something like that, and that is such a disservice to our children to hear us speaking that way about something that we know is sinful, and they think, well, mom and dad, they were a little bit wild when they were kids.
Yep. It's okay. It's just part of it. That's right. I should have went that way. I like that better. What's the dangers of children, or I put young adults in here too, viewing their Christian parents, and we'll put Christians in parentheses, their Christian parents as hypocrites? What are the dangers, you think? Yes, ma'am. No respect for the parents? Yes, ma'am.
I would say it builds a lack of trust that even if they mess up, it's going to be hard for them to come to you and talk to you about it.
Yeah.
One of the things, like, I try to do with my kids, I don't know what impact it will have. I don't really obviously lead it on the line, but like I try to tell them, you know, it doesn't matter how bad it is. It doesn't matter how bad it is. Okay, it's not going to stop me from loving you. Will I be disappointed? Probably, because God gave us emotions, gave us feelings. But that's not going to stop me from loving you.
Right, and that takes a lot of trust for them to be able to come to you with those problems. And I think it might have been Wade a couple of classes ago talked about that communication and trust that's built up. Yes, sir, and then Stephen, sorry.
They may follow your example.
Yeah, that's the worst. So on here, the worst thing that can happen is they become like you. Yeah, which is a terrifying thought to have. Yeah. Yes, sir.
That verse, it hollows out Christianity.
It does.
It makes it worthless. In the eyes of the children, they see it and go, this is not really worth anything. They're just play acting.
And can you blame them? Like, that's the hard part, is because you're wearing a name that's not what you're representing. You're lying. There was a quote that's attributed to Gandhi. I put about 5 seconds of fact-checking into this, so I might be wrong, but it's a quote attributed to Gandhi. He said, "I'd be a Christian if it were not for the Christians." Wow. Think about that. Yeah. So they could reject the faith. They could seek their religious fulfillment. They're groping for something holy. Like, we're meant to find God. And they could reject the blessing that they have of being brought up in a Christian household because we're not doing what we claim to be. And then they could be like us. What are some indicators that could point to us slipping into hypocrisy? What do we think? If you look at your life and you're like, oh, that something might be going on. What do we think? Yes, sir.
We establish practices or rules for our family, and then we start to bend them. We start to justify, well, maybe it's okay this time. Yeah. What do you think?
Are you making exceptions? Similar to that, are you making exceptions? There's a football game on the way tonight.
Yeah.
Do the kids play in it or not? Well, we'll make it an exception just for tonight.
Yeah. Don't let the camel's nose under the tent. Okay, remember that from last time? Great saying. What else we think? So here's some that I had. Let me make sure I'm in the right place. There we go. What about Christians potentially bringing problems or concerns or even sins to your attention? Now, we won't go to Matthew 18 because we don't have time, but we see the pattern. God willing, if there is something wrong in your life, someone has brought it to your attention. That is a blessing. That's the way the system works. One, is that happening? Either on either end of it. If you see something wrong in someone's life, are you going to that person and talking to them out of love? It's not, you're going around with a whip and you're get back in line. It's with love. It's you're on this journey together. And then if you're on the other side, what's your attitude when someone comes and brings that to you? Is it wall defensive? Or is it, wow, thanks for telling me. I don't agree with you, but it starts a dialogue maybe. especially in terms of areas of judgment. That's an area that can be very, very prickly in parenting. A parent can say, hey, listen, I don't think you should do X or Y or whatever it might be. And at that point, I mean, what advice do I have? Who am I? But I would say consider it. If it's coming from a person that has done it before you and done well, listen to it. That's another word for that's wisdom. Get multiple opinions and communicate often with your spouse. Is what you're doing, is it intentional? Like, y'all have talked about this and you've come to a conclusion and this is what we're going to do? Or is it, I don't really like talking to my wife, so I'm just going to make this rule. Or she's going to do that, and then we'll just see where the kids end up. A lot of times that's how it ends up. A guilty conscience. And Sophia, when we were talking about this, she said, hopefully, and I was like, I'm writing that down. Hopefully, yes, hopefully you have a guilty conscience. That's a blessing. We talked when Paul chided the Corinthians about their acceptance of the brother that was in sin. He came back later and he was like, hey, sorry it upset you, but I'm not sorry. Like, that's what it was supposed to do. If you have a guilty conscience at all, thank God that it hasn't calloused over, and make the correction. And then acting differently depending on who you're with. And we see Peter and Barnabas as an example, things along those lines. All right, so other adults. I thought I was going to run out of material tonight, and I'm having to go quicker. Other adults. What are some examples of adults that we allow to have impact on our children's lives? What do we think? Throw it out. There's a bunch. Teachers, absolutely. In high school, college. Coaches, yes.
That's what I said, coaches.
Chris? Okay. Come on. Just kidding. What else? There's another hand. Wade? Oh, okay. You got one?
Well, I mean, along that line, anything that you allow your kids to do extracurricularly, I mean, whatever that is, somebody's got to teach them how.
Someone that is leading that. Yes, sir. Seth? TV, YouTube. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yep. Influencers, right? Yeah. Zach? Tim, where are you pointing at?
No, he said it.
Oh, he said it. Okay.
He's quicker.
Okay. Zach, do you have something?
I was going to say, like, their peers.
Oh, friends? Yeah. Friends' parents?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great one.
But also their friends' parents. If they're hanging out with them, they go to a birthday party, their friends' parents are there.
Yep. What else we think? Sorry, I've had my head turned this way.
Unrighteous families.
Ooh, family members. Yeah. I didn't want to make it awkward. It wasn't awkward enough, so let's just go there. Absolutely. Yes. What else? Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Book authors.
Pardon me?
Book authors.
Authors of, yeah, absolutely. So I'll show you kind of a list I came up with. Y'all nailed most of where my mind was. So other Christians at church. So this isn't just negative, right? Other Christians at church, extended family, camp counselors, coaches, school teachers, influencers on social media, YouTube, podcasts, etc. Secular friends' parents. Zach, we were right there. Medical personnel. What about doctors, nurses, counselors? Or it might be. I was just thinking of anyone that could come into contact that they have, they're in a superior position to offer some type of guidance. Now, who said a minute ago, who said teachers? Was it Stu? Does anyone disagree? So I wanted to make an assertion on here. I bolded, underlined, and italicized, we allow. Is that fair? Do we allow, how much control do we have over everything that we just said? Let's specifically talk teachers. Do we have control over that?
Ultimately, yes.
Can you walk me through your reasoning? So I would agree with you. I just want to see if we got there the same way.
Well, I mean, it's just taken for granted that you're going to follow the norm, possibly. And as a parent, you may not think that you have options, but you are the one who is taking them to the public school, or you're the one taking them to the private school, or to the homeschooling events, or whatever you choose to do. You are ultimately facilitating that. So it is your decision at the end of the day.
Yeah. That's very difficult, and does anyone disagree that would like to take the other side of that, just for argument's sake even? Because if not, I'll kind of go into that. So you think a lot of times, especially if a family doesn't have a lot of means, physical, monetary means, they're kind of beholden to the public education system. And if they get a teacher that, say, identifies as like a trans person, now, I'm thinking of something that, if a teacher is, let's say, a homosexual or whatever it might be, that's not something that, as long as it's not necessarily in your face, okay, but trans, it's blatant, okay, so that's kind of where my mind went. That's a hard thing because, yes, ultimately we are the shepherds of our kids. And that means that there could be some horribly difficult decisions that we have to make. Can I afford a private education? Maybe not. Can I afford it? Yes, sir.
But also you control that some of the public system by where you live. So you don't have to be a person of great means to potentially just move to another area.
Right.
And so you have, my dad chose where we live because he goes, I want my kids to go to the school. That's why we're living here. And that's what we all make that decision.
What would you say if someone came to you and said, yeah, I understand, you're right, but this is where I was raised, all my family's here, this is where I have a job, like I've never lived anywhere else, and you're saying that the expectation, like I have the ability to control where I live.
Yeah, if you're using those things as excuses, you've built that up in your mind because you are choosing. Ultimately, you're making the choice. You can justify it however you want, but is anyone trapping you here?
Right.
Is someone causing you to? You're choosing it, and you're limiting yourself by making those claims.
Right. What does Jesus say? So yes, thank you. What does Jesus say? You have to forsake everything and follow me. Are you willing to do that? The answer has to be yes. So worst case scenario, yes, ma'am.
And in this day and age, probably not high school, I'm not a high school person, but there are UIL requirements. But in the other areas, it's almost an open enrollment time. You live in a neighborhood and you don't want to send your children to that particular school, you can request a transfer. And it's almost always granted. Almost always. You can even request a different school district than the one you live in if you're doing public education. So today, we're afforded more opportunities to fix those things. The key is you got to know what's inside the school.
And thank God for that, right? Because there are places around the world that we don't have that. So, but I think let me just try to put these two things together. You don't just surrender to your situation and say there's nothing I can do. Throw a fit in your mind, look for situations, and ask other Christians for help walking through those mental hurdles. So you're not alone. Thank God for everyone here. All right. Oh, go ahead. Yes, sir.
In many cases, unless the school has one first grade teacher, one second grade teacher, you can generally make a request to have your child moved to another classroom, even in high school.
Yep. You just have to care enough to do it. Yep. Tim, you telling me, or you actually have something? All right.
So, first thing is it's not static either. You can do something with the world that you live in. You can have influence on the people that are making the hiring decisions for these teachers that are in that spot. I mean, you can run for a school board position. Sometimes they're unopposed. Like, you can just get it. And the people that want to do this are the ones that seek out those little places where they can make the most effect. We're going to, with our families, we're going to a baseball game and do it with our families. And they're seeking these things out because that's what they do, because they're evil. So that's number one. Number two, can you go back to that slide that you just had?
You can't go back. Yep.
Yes, thank you. So you talked about how these are all negative, but if we can find people right there that are on the positive on each one of those categories, it's like a rocket ship.
Yeah.
Putting our kids in the fast track.
Great point. All right, Laurie, and then we're moving on.
One thing not on our list that I thought of is employers. A lot of our
Oh, yeah, yeah.
for the first time at age 16.
Yeah.
We need to think about where they're going to work, who they're going to be around. Some places are not good for our kids to work.
No. Yep.
Maybe they can work for a Christian, or maybe they can work, you got to know what's going on. Because, when our boys very first started working out, or working, Will did, you know, he worked at Whataburger, and, you know, some of the stuff he came home with, you're just like, okay, maybe this isn't the best place for him to work at. And, you know, so there's a lot of control in those situations. And also, it is amazing to me how much pressure they put on kids in high school to start missing church.
Yeah, already.
And we want to set that precedent now, because I'm telling you, if they start missing it during high school, they'll start missing during college, and as they're adults, they won't see the priority they need to have.
And it's almost like at that point, and tell me, I'm a little ways from having kids, God willing, to go to college, but it's almost like you're almost at the finish line as parents, like I can take a break. And that's not the case. It's like, no. It like the stakes get even higher as each day goes on, like for them to get out of your house. So.
I remember when I was in high school and I got my first job at a seafood restaurant, and I worked on weekends. I didn't work during the week because of school, but I worked on the weekends. And I remember they started putting pressure on me to miss services on Sunday. And I remember my mom saying, you can't give in one time.
Yeah.
One time they're going to ask again and again. And I'm like, well, they're making me feel bad. They're saying other people have to miss. You're not being a good team member. She's like, no, you have to show them your priorities from day one. I still think about that.
Teach them. A job at that age, does it really matter? No. They're learning. They're under your house. Teach them before they have a wife and kids at home, before they have to do that. We were talking in the high school class. Now I'm getting on my soapbox. We were talking in the high school class, and I was like, hey, how many of y'all would take a job if you had to work on Sundays and had to miss church? And I'm like, no. Like, okay, well, what if you went to become this, trauma surgeon and it required that? And they're like, nah, we still wouldn't do it. I go, okay, what if I paid you $80,000 a month? That's $1 million a year. And they're like, well, I mean, there's places that do the Lord's Supper in the afternoon. That's the camel sticking its nose under the tent, right there. Yes, anybody can do this when the pressure's not there. But what about when I have the world to give you? What about that? Something to think about. We'll jump into this. How do we? Because I want to end in about 4 minutes, so we'll see. Because I want to end on a positive note. How do we balance protecting our children from ungodly influences with not sheltering them too much? Okay, and that's kind of a thought that I've heard a lot throughout the years. Let me just jump through this. So first and foremost, sin is sin. And so don't sugarcoat it. That's kind of what Kyle was alluding to earlier. James 4:7 says, therefore submit to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. There's no such thing as a little sin is okay. That's not a thing. Don't use sheltering as an excuse for not acting intentionally or with a purpose. Not all advice is equal. We talked about that a second ago. And I kind of look at it as my purpose right now is providing perspective to my kids. When we make decisions, I don't just with a iron fist, this is the way we're going to do it. No, it's, hey, this is the way we're going to do it. Family meeting. Let's talk about this and see how we got to this decision. Does everybody agree with this? Does anyone disagree? What do we think? How do you cycle through mentally with these problems? And understand too that you're going to make mistakes. And again, tell me if I'm wrong on any of this. Hebrews 5:14 says, those who by reason of use have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil. Reason of use. Someone says, hey, don't touch the pan, that'll burn you. I've touched the pan plenty of times. Okay, and yeah, that's true. Validated. I'm going to make mistakes. As a parent, most likely you will too. It's just learning and not making those same mistakes over and over. And I think really what we're talking about when we talk about sheltering is being naive. No one wants to have naive kids because we don't want to necessarily expose them to sin, to toughen them up, but we don't want them to be naive. And what that means is a lack of wisdom or judgment. Matthew 10:16 says to be wise as serpents but harmless as doves. That's the goal of what we're trying to do. Kerwin, do you have something? Yeah.
Sometimes I think of, there are certain scenes that we're really upset about. And there are
of what? Sorry?
There are certain scenes that we really show our disgust and we show it to our kids. But there are some of them that we kind of like, it's like, we don't say anything, but it's like, okay, don't worry about that. We don't say it.
Yeah.
But in our minds, like, that's really nothing. But this sin, oh, our kids have to see this and get upset about it. When I look at the Bible and I read about sins, a sin is a sin, regardless how we view it as a human being.
And it needs to be treated as such.
He did not Harrison and a cross carrying the whole sins, which covered every sin.
We're gonna go through this slide decently fast. I'm sorry again. About family members who are either not Christians, not faithful Christians, or are ungodly in their influence. That's extremely difficult. And maybe the recommendation I would have is that we can't be different people. We can't be different people just because we have family members who we've known all our lives show up and we're totally different. And I don't mean like different as in, you're treating them nice because they're older or whatever it might be, but are you still a Christian around them or not? Luke 14, 26 and 27 describes Jesus saying that our faith is thicker than our blood. We need to be ready to forsake all, including family, if that is what is coming in between us and our faith. Age-appropriate discussions about those family members, you can't just stick your head in the sand and not ever talk to them about that, but it needs to be age-appropriate. Be very careful about giving trusted access to your children. And that means, asking advice, giving life perspectives, living in your home even, babysitting, sleepovers, whatever it might be. Just be very, very careful. So does anybody have any other comments before I end with a good note? Yes, ma'am.
Teach your children, starting at an early age, to live in the world but not conform to the world.
Yeah, that's great. Yes, sir.
One piece of advice I would give the parents with younger kids, ours are out of the house now. Sleepovers are so dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have no control over your child for 12, 18, 20 hours, however long it is. And Laurie and I talked about it a lot. Almost every single bad thing we were exposed to as children happened at a sleepover. Right? For me, alcohol, pornography, vandalism, like all of those sleepovers, right? So super dangerous.
Yeah. And now how worse is it in that every kid above the age of like a newborn has a cell phone that has internet access and parents that just let them go up there without any type of supervision. What do you think they're looking at? Like those teenage boys, like I don't have to be a prophet to tell you. Any other thoughts? Thank you for bringing that out. I was going to point that out and I forgot. Thank you. So I wanted to end on two notes. One, this is a story from a book by a gentleman named Sewell Hall. If y'all have heard of Mr. Hall. So this is a negative influence, family negative influence, and then we're going to go to a positive in just a minute. This is a story of Valentina. I'll try not to mispronounce her name throughout this, if you'll just bear with me. I first met Valentina at about 7:30 Sunday morning, July 26th, at the home of Alan Williamson in Bucharest, Romania. I had heard the doorbell ring about 6 a.m. and the voice of an excited young lady, but recognizing her language as Romanian, I went back to sleep confident there was nothing requiring my attention. Hearing her name, when I met her, however, greatly increased my interest. I had read of Valentina's obedience to the gospel before I left home. She had inadvertently, or was it providentially, attended a gospel meeting as a result of her efforts to find another religious activity in the same building. She agreed to further studies with Christians, and after several weeks, she was baptized into Christ. But just as Jesus was tempted immediately after his baptism, so was Valentina. During the time that this 21-year-old young lady was studying, she had been inclined to lie about where she was going when she left for services. After her new birth, however, she put away this work of the flesh. When her brother and mother visited her dorm room on a Sunday, they learned where she had been. They ultimately set about discouraging her, attempting to do so by destroying her Bible and songbook in the intervals when her brother was not slapping her around. They left her with a stern warning to give up her faith. When still in school in Bucharest, this babe in Christ took refuge in the homes and in the love of Christians there. But she dreaded returning to her home village when school closed. It is hard for most Americans to comprehend the shame a family feels in Romania when one of their family leaves the Orthodox Church. When Valentina arrived in Bucharest on Sunday morning, she learned some things from her family had done to her. She had been slapped around once more by her brother and beaten once by her father. Seeing that physical abuse was not breaking her will, they resorted to verbal and social abuse. Her brother took a plastic water bottle and sprinkled her liberally, saying that by baptizing her again, he would help her along with her new faith. Even more humiliating, when she refused a cup of beer at the table, her brother tossed its contents into her face. And her father, not satisfied with this, made her face the target for a mouthful of his own beer. Her mother, convinced Valentina was under some kind of spell, took articles of Valentina's clothing to the local priest to be exorcised by a proxy. The effect on Valentina? The morning we met in Williamson's living room, she had gotten up at 2 a.m. and fled from her home to avoid being hindered by her family from going to worship, weaving through the backyards and hiding on the school ground, coming out of the shadows just long enough to check the destination of each bus that passed. She avoided her brother until she was safely on board the bus to Bucharest. It would be difficult to imagine a more joyful reunion than the one she experienced as she arrived at the meeting place and shared again the heartwarming fellowship of those of like precious faith. Think about the influence of that family. And if you got 60 seconds, it'll be worth it. Okay. This was a report from Billy Kumar in India about a baptism at the leper church, the church that is made up of leper brethren. This is a positive influence. The brethren encountered an unusual situation where a young girl came running to them one early morning with very torn little clothes covering her body. She was a prostitute who was hired by a few drunk men and have beaten her and stole her belongings. They left her on the streets without any clothes. She wrapped herself with a sheet, and having found her way to where the leper brethren were, hearing them sing as a part of their morning devotion. The leper sisters in the colony gave her their own clothes, which they themselves did not have, and have helped her. She was treated by a nurse who comes to attend from the medical needs of the brethren. We help fund that. And she was given food that they eat. The girl stayed with them for 10 days, during which they taught her the gospel. I studied with her, and she wanted to be baptized. So we took her near by water to baptize her. She wanted to be baptized by the leper brother who took care of her all these days she was there. As she went to the water to be baptized, we were stopped by an entire village. We were told by an entire village not to baptize her, and they didn't want a leper to get into the water, and also didn't want any baptisms in that canal. We encountered the same problem in 2 other places. Nevertheless, we were able to find a sewer, and we baptized her. The young woman went home with joy, and we praised God for the opportunity that the brethren were given to share His word. That's a positive example of the light we can be in the world. That's all I got tonight. Thank you all so much for being 2 minutes over.